10 days ago, I watched Serenity. It took me some time to completely gather my thoughts on the movie, and if you haven't seen my video on the show, I would recommend watching the Firefly video first so you can get my full thoughts on it. But I loved the show. I fell in love with it so fast, and so of course I would watch this movie. And I really like Serenity. I think it's a good movie, but I do have a lot of criticisms about it. To get things out of the way, unfortunately, going into the movie and even into the show, I knew that Wash was gonna die in the movie, and that's completely my fault. I read some spoilers online before I even watched the show, so I should have taken more precaution, but I still think that his death hits pretty hard here. And initially, I didn't really have any tears when he died. I was pretty sad, but when the camera pans back to show the graves of Mr. Universe, Shepherd Book, and then Wash, that's when the movie got a few tears at me because I was like, dang, he's actually gone. So I think it does feel emotional, but one of my main complaints with his death is that we move on from it too fast. Like, he gets stabbed and they have to evacuate the ship. I understand that, but it just should have slowed things down a little bit to just let us live in the moment, live that Wash is actually, dead. To me, Wash's death it feels like stuff we'd see down the road, not something we'd see this early. It feels like sort of endgame stuff, because we would live with this character for multiple seasons, then to just have him killed and ripped away, that would have hit so hard. And I think you get the same feeling with Book's death, in my opinion. And these also just feel like two character deaths that are just so, big, that I don't think you would want to have them in the same season. Like, I mean, you could have them in the same season. I think they'd have to be episodes apart, but it feels weird for them to be in the same movie because they're just such big deaths. And I think, if they had a show, of course, things would play out differently. But what's the stupidest thing is that I read that the characters were killed because Alan Tudyk and Ron Glass could not commit to sequels, which just doesn't make sense to me, because of course this movie did not get a sequel, and we are getting the animated show, but the animated show is going to be set before this movie, so in a way it feels like it's limiting what we can see from the world of Firefly. Like, I would love to see something take place after this movie, but I don't know if it would hit the same without Book, but more especially Wash. So I don't know, maybe some comics or books take place after Serenity. I'm not sure, but I think their deaths I don't think it was entirely necessary. The gap between the show and the movie is also really weird. It comes off as a bit jarring, and one example of this is Mal and Simon's relationship. It feels like it regresses, especially because the end of the show, Mal is like to Simon, like, hey, you're part of my crew, we're cool and all that. And even in, I think it was episode 9, Ariel, Jane betrays Simon and River, and he even says, Mal says when he's about to throw Jane at the airlock, you betrayed me, you betrayed my crew. And so it just feels weird to get back to this state of, you're not part of the crew, you're separate, you can get off whenever you like. It regresses that relationship that we had seen, and I don't know why. Another really weird thing I had with the gap between the movie and the show is Shepherd Book leaving and setting up Haven. I think in the grand scheme of things, it makes complete sense for him to do that. If there was multiple seasons, I think this is also where he'd end up. I can totally see it. But the same also goes for Inara leaving the ship. I want to see these moments. I want to see it happen and how it affects the characters, like how Inara leaving affects Mal. And I'm thinking that, Joss Whedon writing and directing this movie, he's thinking, I might not be able to get a chance to revisit this world and characters again, so I'm gonna skip over these little details because, I might not get to do it again, and I just want to do these things. And that makes sense to me, and was my thinking when watching the movie. But then I read that Wash and Shepherd Book, I said they were killed because the actors could not commit to sequels. But the writing doesn't feel like that. It's just like, why are you writing these characters' deaths because they can't commit to sequels, but then the way you're writing is skipping over things and it just makes it feel like I'm doing these things because I might not get to again, but then you're killing characters off for a sequel that may never happen. It doesn't make sense to me, and it makes me really annoyed just thinking about it. Mr. Universe's introduction was also just a bit jarring because the movie treats him like it's a character that we already know, even though we don't know him. This is an introduction to him. And just like when they show his grave, it's like, were we supposed to be, saddened by his death? Because, like, we have no emotional attachment to the character. So it just felt weird to treat him like someone we already knew when we don't know him. Just introduce him as a new character. Like, why? I didn't notice this at first when watching the movie until I was reading a couple Reddit comments about it. But why was River's rescue retconned? Because in the opening of the movie, we see Simon saving River, but we know in the show that he paid like 2 people or something to rescue River. She gets put in cryo freeze, and then he brings her upon the Serenity, and then it gets opened up in the first episode, and that's him seeing her for the first time, and he doesn't know what has happened to her. And so for Simon to be at this rescue just breaks that completely. Like, you kind of see that, oh, he already kind of knows what happened to River by being there, and that just doesn't make sense because in the show he knew nothing. So to change it to this for him being there just doesn't make sense. If you wanted to show and set up for like people who haven't seen the movie that River and Simon were being hunted down, just show like a handoff of the cryo freeze pod happening after she gets rescued by these 2 people. It just doesn't make sense at all, and it just breaks what we already know in the show. And it's such a really weird change. Like, why would you do that? It also just makes Simon more heroic than he was depicted in the show, because he kind of like had emotions about not having saved River, and so for him to actually have saved River, just it doesn't make sense for him to feel these things later in the show. So it's just such a weird change. Like, why would you do that? I'm still so just dumbfounded. Like, why?
I'm also just like a really big Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan. It's like my favorite Marvel show ever. And so I couldn't help but notice that in the intro of this movie, Simon, when he's saving River, he uses this device that shoots up a little thing that like sends out a little shockwave that knocks out all of the people in the room. And that's the exact same device in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that Ward uses in season 1, episode 2. 084 is the title. He uses that device, and so it's also used in the second to last episode of the show, season 7, episode 12. The end is at hand, and Joss Whedon helped create Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So it's cool to see that he kind of snuck something from Firefly in there, because that's a really cool device. So it's cool to see that, it goes back to this show, which is really interesting. I didn't know that.
Now, everything I've said has been a bit negative, and that's just because I love the show so much. I fell in love with it so fast, so thinking about these things just makes me annoyed. So I'll rant over for now, I guess. But going into things that I did like about this movie was River. She got to be a complete badass in this movie. That fight scene when she fought all the Reavers outside the hallway was just sick as hell, and that bar fight scene was also really cool. She just killed it, like, literally. And the action was also just great in general. That final fight with the Mal and Operative was really cool too. I just loved it. And Chiwetel Ejiofor, I think so you say his name, he played Baron Moto in Doctor Strange and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. He killed it here. He's cold, calculating, he's devoted, and I just loved his story of being so devoted to the Alliance that he's going to do these horrible things. Like the line he has of Mal says, "I don't kill kids," and he says, "Well, I do." Like, he's just such a good villain, and I love his arc of being so devoted to the Alliance, finding out the truth, and then just turning against them and letting Mal go free. And I really like that. He was such a cool character. At the end of this movie, when all the characters are fighting the Reavers and they get locked in that tunnel, Simon's injured, and then Kaylee's also injured, and River's out there fighting all of them. The stakes of this movie feel very raised. Like, it feels like this is kind of the end game of the world. And I think that also comes from, Wash and Book having died. It just feels like the stakes are very raised. And I think that the characters and Mal, they did things to help other people, of course, but they also did things to, serve themselves. Like episode 13, Heart of Gold, they were helping other people Also in episode 2, the train job, they did something to serve themselves, but then ended up, returning those stolen goods. So they always did things for other people, but they also did a lot of things for themselves. And I think that it's not out of pocket for Mal and the whole crew to do all this. The visuals of this movie were really good. It felt really clean. The VFX looked like really good. That whole final like space battle when they brought the Reavers onto whatever Mr. Universe's planet was called, that looked just like super cool. And I think I read that they used practical effects as much as they could. Maybe that's part of it, but just the CGI overall was just super clean. Like the Serenity looked really good compared to the show, and the show doesn't have bad VFX at all. It's just you can tell that it's older in the show. But another thing that I noticed in this movie and its visuals was that there was a lot more blue color, and compared to the original show, they only really used blue when they were like within the Alliance. Like I think it's episode 3 when they have the interrogation. There's some blue colors in the background, and episode 9 on Ariel, there's a lot of blue there, and I think that's because it shows the technological feel advancements of the Alliance and what they brought, but also just in this movie I think it showcases like the grasp that the Alliance have, like how it's also on the forefront of all the characters' minds, and that their hand reaches far with the operative. Overall, it may seem like that I don't like this movie, but I enjoyed it. I had a great time watching it. Just all of my issues come from that I love the show so much, and just so these inconsistencies and jumps just really annoyed me. And as I said, I can see why Joss Whedon did some of this, because like maybe you don't get to revisit the world again, but then why were Wash and Book killed off because the actors couldn't commit to a sequel and there wasn't ever any. And just it feels like Joss Whedon kind of writ himself into a corner with that, because like the animated show is gonna bridge the gap between the show and the movie, and it just feels like we might not get to see what the world past Serenity is. But I did enjoy this movie, and getting to see a continuation of the show that just ended really abruptly was really nice. I also really liked the ending. I thought that was super sweet with Mal teaching River how to fly. I really liked that moment. And part of me also did wish, like, if they played the Firefly theme in the movie, that would have been pretty cool. But I imagine they'll play it in the animated show, and that'd be a cool moment. I think if I had to give this movie a number out of 10, I'd probably say like a 7 out of 10. It's still a great time. It's a good movie, despite the criticisms I have with it. I think like maybe I could lean a little bit towards 8 out of 10, but that's like pushing it. And I still love this show, and I still think this is a great continuation to that show, and I'm looking forward to this animated show a lot, so I can't wait to see that. And if anyone made it this far, thank you for watching. If you could like, subscribe, comment if you agree or disagree, all that, it would be appreciated. And as I said, this animated show, really looking forward to it.